Ian. I've got the pleasure of the pre-coffee slot, and someone just teased you with the offer of a cup of coffee, and now I've jumped in and you have to listen to me. I'm going to move quite quickly, and apologies in advance for the speed, because when Liam asked me to speak here this evening, and thanks for the invitation, I tried to squash too much, far too much in. So the pace will be a little bit quick. First of all, who am I? What do I do? I'm from the UCC Centre for Planning, Education and Research. I'm involved in teaching, research consultancy in the field of planning. Okay, we teach young planners to make good decisions, hopefully about the future of our towns. But prior to that, and I do want to say that I'm not just someone who thinks about planning. I did practice as a planner for 7 or 8 years with Matrix Associates, who had an office in Cork and London. Our interest mainly was development. We mainly and principally worked for developers and town councils and local authorities thinking about towns just like Bandon. And also, I was lucky enough once to look at Bandon a little bit specifically. I haven't been back in Bandon in a professional capacity for quite some time, so this is a very, very interesting and selfish experience for me. What I propose to do very, very quickly is just say a few things about towns like Bandon, first of all, some general observations and some specific thoughts about Bandon. It might be somewhat unstructured in that I jump out in terms of scale, like I go to the town in hinterland and right into the town centre from time to time. So please bear with me. Why do we need to talk about towns? One of the reasons we need to talk about towns is lots and lots of people live in them. In 1991 we had 750,000 people living in towns. 20 years later, that had doubled. So there are now almost 1.5 million, probably in the 2016 census, living in towns like Bandon, towns over 1,500 generally. 30% of the population of this country live in towns. It's an interesting perspective. We don't really hear about towns as a constituency. It's becoming more and more popular to talk like this. There are 844 of us. That's another reason we should talk about towns. We have some students from one of the schools here in Bandon who visit us from time to time. I tell them, look, that Bandon is important because if you can see your town from outer space, you must be important. You can see Bandon from outer space. And I really hope I have the red marker on it. Of course I do. I'm a planner. We talk quite a lot about the countryside. And when I say we, I'm talking about the planning profession. And in political terms. We spend an awful lot of time talking about our cities and the country, urban and rural. Who talks about towns, specifically? The Irish Model Towns Network and the Heritage Council do. But in planning terms, who talks about towns and what are we saying about towns? Towns for me are very, very interesting, not just as places to live and to visit, but because they combine the urban and the rural in the way that cities don't in particular. You get a very, very interesting mix of urban and rural qualities in towns. This central photograph here is Mary Street in Clonmel, a very, very striking example of the countryside almost invading the town. A very intimate relationship of town and country. It says something. It tells us something about the nature of towns and the relationship between a town and its hinterland, which I'll come back to a little bit later and was mentioned already. The idea of a hinterland. And I think Ed mentioned that idea. When we're speaking about Bandon, I have a map of Bandon up here, but it's not just the town, the walls and the environs. It's a very, very wide hinterland that supports this town. We must remember that. And it's a hinterland that moves towards the city, and it moves towards Clonakilty and other places. That hinterland still exists. Many people live out here. We need to think about those people and how to, in a very crude way, how do you capture those people's attention? Their love for a place, their loyalty. But also we need to talk about towns because of the problems of suburbanisation. Suburbanisation isn't just happening to our cities, it's also happening to our towns. And again, I'll come back to this later. A very interesting quote from probably the best book on Irish towns written in quite some time. It's in 1975 by Patrick Shaffrey. And he said, and he's writing in 1975 in a time which was reasonably positive in terms of the overall Irish economy, even though we were just post the oil crisis. He said, and I'll just read this quick quote, "It is possible that Ireland could become economically prosperous, solve its many problems, but in the process destroy all that is pleasant and attractive in its towns. If this were to happen, the result would be a shallow and blinkered society." I would argue, from my experience of this town and my walk around this town this evening, that it has not happened in this town. It has happened in many other towns. We need to talk about towns because of this issue of vacancy. And we heard about recently from Edmund about the threat of online shopping, the concept of retail shrinkage. We need to talk about towns also because of what we're doing to them accidentally sometimes. We're providing lots of motorway and road infrastructure near and in towns. We know what happens when you put in motorways and junctions far away from towns. You can see here, it pulls development towards those places, towards those infrastructures. We must be very careful about what we do when it comes to transport. Look at, I'm not going to name these places, it doesn't matter. We look at a traditional town centre in South Tipperary, I'll go that far. And it's a place I'm quite fond of as well. We look at our traditional town centre. This is the place, the town centre that you want to protect and sell and market. And we wonder why those places are under pressure. Well, we have to look at where else we're putting town centre uses in the wrong locations and at the wrong scales. But we can learn from these places. But there are positive stories here as well. Towns are very, very old. This town has been here for hundreds and hundreds of years, not as a small little village, but as a big, important town, as a significant social, economic, and religious settlement as well. They're places that have life. They're of a convenient size. They're very, very, towns of 5 to 15,000 are a manageable size. We can do things with them. They have lots of people living in them. We have an ageing society. And generally speaking, and I'm not talking about the planning profession, but when we think about what are we going to do with an ageing society, people think of nursing homes in the countryside. We should be accommodating people in towns where they can walk and they can see people and they can go to that post office. And actually we can operationalise this idea, and I've mentioned livability. Planners are forced to talk about sustainability. Towns are the ideal place where we can actually apply the principles of sustainability, living, working and playing in the same place. While I'm finishing off the talk, I'd like to just provoke some thoughts, and maybe you might think about them a little bit over coffee or attack me for them. First thing I would say is Bandon is in a good place. And what I mean by that is it has assets and it has potential. It's not as if we're trying to imagine something or make something up about the place to make it okay. The question that I'm sure is going to be asked a little bit later on tomorrow is, where is Bandon going? And what I mean by that is, where does Bandon see itself in a number of years' time in terms of, is it a market town? Is it a country town? Is it a metropolitan town? It looks west, but it also looks towards the city. It's in a very interesting space functionally. It certainly fulfills a role as a commuter town to a certain degree, but it's also an independent market town with its own identity. It's not a suburb, it's not a dormitory town. Somebody talked about, and I think it was Ed, about marketing and branding. I always wonder about the idea of Bandon being the gateway to West Cork. And again, please attack me for this, I'm well able for it. What do you do with the gateway? You go through it, okay? I'm not suggesting that you abandon this issue, just think about it. Can we not talk about Clonakilty and Kinsale tonight? And I hope people don't take that the wrong way. When I was here a number of years ago, we often ended up speaking about Clonakilty and Kinsale. Bandon is Bandon. Okay? Hopefully we will take inspiration from places like Clonakilty, Kinsale, Westport, Lismore, and places that people will mention. But we shouldn't imitate. We should innovate. Congestion is desirable. Again, people might, throw stones at me for that. Congestion is usually a sign that people want to go to a place. Okay? It's the places that don't have congestion are in real trouble. Now, we have a different congestion problem in that we want to get rid of the traffic, for example, that doesn't need to be in the town centre. But we must be very, very careful. Oh yes, and parking is overrated. It really is. What's really important is what's there, what's in the town centre. If a town centre is good enough, people will suffer poor parking, expensive parking to get there. The best example of that is Kilkenny. Kilkenny is expensive and difficult to get to, but the product is good enough. We need parking, but and we need to shrink to grow. I'll come back to that idea. It's about the retail story. Town centre needs to retain its compactness, perhaps physically get smaller in retail terms, and repopulate it with something else. This is Leixlip in County Kildare. Here is the built-up area, and the town centre is about 10 hectares. So it's a population of about twice the size of Bandon, with a small village main street effectively. So it's a town that's grown up very, very quickly. Bandon is very, very different. It's got a comparable size. It's 500 hectares, but it's got a town centre of approximately, and this is a very rough figure, of about 35 hectares. So it has a town centre that's bigger than its population, comparably speaking. It's also very well located, relative to its population, unlike Leixlip. So it's not a commuter town that has grown up very, very quickly. It's an ancient walled town. Okay, so specifically on Bandon then. The following are just a collection of random thoughts about ideas for towns and for Bandon specifically. I think we need to think big and small at the same time. Have a big idea about the place, but also be prepared to do very, very small things that make a difference all of the time. Don't be a slave to a big plan. Don't wait for the big plan to be finalised. Yes, government departments love plans. Planners love plans more than anybody. But don't be afraid not to abandon the principles of the plan, but just to do things when you can. For example, this was an old diagram of proposals for taking traffic out of Bandon, completing the bypass. I know it's still a very, very hot issue. You know, a potential future northern bypass. But if we were to wait for a bypass to sort out the town centre, it would never happen. We need to think about what you can do in the shorter term while you're waiting for that in terms of traffic calming, beautification. You might have an idea for, this was an idea from the Bandon Action Programme back in 2008, of using the river as almost central organising principle for the whole town, turning the town back to face the river once again. So that's a kind of a big concept that you can organise lots of different actions and initiatives around, but it shouldn't stop you thinking about smaller things, about tree planting around footpaths. And that's happening. I've noticed a significant change in Bandon just in the experience of the river in the last 2 or 3 years. It's a town actually that's beginning to engage with the river, not just in terms of some of the residential environments we have here, but the walkways and so on. Being opportunistic, I noticed Cork County Council have applied for planning permission to do some works to Patrick's Quay, if I'm correct, in the last week, which is streetscape improvements, car park improvements here, and public realm improvements to make that place much more attractive as a place to be and to pass through, urbanising the place a little bit. And this is being opportunistic in a positive way, doing things while you can. There's no point in, Bandon can't wait until all of the flood relief works and all the main drainage works are done to do small things to make improvements. Livability is a topic we use quite a lot. The question I'd ask is, does Bandon have the ingredients? Are there enough things that we could sell to visitors or to potential residents in Bandon? Could you, for example, list the things that make Bandon an attractive place to live in tonight? What would they be? How would you sell it? How would an estate agent or retail agent sell this town? The 10-minute town is another generic concept. The general principle in a town of in the town and environs of about 7,000 people here, and about 10,000 in the hinterland, we should really be able to get from anywhere to anywhere within 10 minutes. That's convenience. We heard the term convenience being used. It needs to be a convenient town. Kilkenny, for example, have this 10-minute town policy as a guiding principle for all of its thinking, if you like. I'd suspect that Bandon is of a convenient size to articulate such a policy. And it's really about just linking all of these things. Linking your schools, shops, jobs, public transport, the countryside, the river, all of those things. When you add them all up, you have a town. It might sound a little bit obvious, but healthy towns have healthy hearts. If the town centre is successful and vibrant, the town will be successful and vibrant. Question, I suppose, kind of questions we'd like to address here today and tomorrow is, what will make this town centre healthy and vibrant? Suggest that we need to squeeze the middle, and we've heard a lot in politics about the squeezed middle. I think it's an opportunity in retail terms, certainly. The retail footprint of market towns is not going to get any bigger. In fact, it's going to contract, and it's contracting quite significantly. We have to put a line around somewhere in this town centre and say, this is our town centre. The town centre cannot continue to expand beyond that point. And this is a quote from the Bandon local area plan, and it's in relation to convenience shopping, so large supermarkets. Town centre is the first area to consider. In other words, it's the priority, and that's correct. But given the issue of traffic congestion in the town centre, other alternatives could also be taken into account. It is important that if new convenience use is located outside of the town centre, any area of comparison use proposed in the development is kept to a minimum. That's somewhat dangerous, because what it's suggesting is that if you're going to allow a large new supermarket somewhere outside the town centre, we must be careful about how much comparison it takes out of the town centre. In fact, what we should be saying is we can't allow any comparison out of the town centre. Squeezing the middle probably means doing something like this. This is Riverview, I think I'm correct, with Lidl here. Is that roughly right? I hope my dots are in the right place. And this is Aldi on the old Bandon Office Supplies site. I think I've probably squeezed the purple one in a little bit too much. At the moment, they could behave like two anchors at the end of a shopping mall. In a way, that's as far east as the town should ever go, and in fact, the problem with it is its entrance. The pedestrian entrance is on the eastern end, I think, of that Aldi. It faces the wrong way. But in any case, that's the retail core. That's the retail, that's the heart, that's the compact core. And we should be very cautious in the future about what else might happen. For example, if new transport infrastructure is developed, like for example a northern bypass sometime in the distant future, pressure will inevitably come for new retail. We must be very cautious about where that goes, because these are the kinds of places that large retailers sometimes look at. They don't, and convenience retailing isn't convenience retailing. It always brings comparison. If you go to any Tesco store today, you'll see significant food offering and significant comparison offering. And it's that comparison offering that competes with, and quite viciously, with the main street. We should think about our gateways. Gateways, those entry points into the town, have a significant impact. As you drive up from Inishannon for the first time, or on the Clonakilty Road, you're going to form your first impression. And sometimes people make a decision around whether they'll enter a town on the basis of that drive. What does this place look like? We've got Kilbrogan here, and edge of Glasslyn Road, and on the Clonakilty Road, just here. Three very important locations to focus attention on. On one of them, particularly around the Shambles and Kilbrogan Hill, we have a very grand entrance to the town, and it feels, the scale of it is quite large. It's quite impressive. You feel like you're entering somewhere important. It also has many urban qualities, and you can see the spires of the churches. You see two large cathedral-like churches. It feels like a city, market, a big market town. And then you have the Shambles area. When you enter in from, I'm not going to do all of the gateways, because we're very close to coffee. A very different experience on Glasslyn Road. It's going along the old railway line, or close to the old railway line. It's much more open. It's much more natural, perhaps, in terms of some of the appearance, but it's a bit more industrial. And then there's the forgotten entrance along, if I'm correct, is it Connolly, and back into Irishtown, and can be quite a spectacular entrance into the town. It's the way I always drive into Bandon. We should think about that. I'm not talking about using it as a traffic route, but using it as an important potential gateway into the town. Schools, not something I expected to talk about. The first time I came to Bandon proper, prior to 2004, my only experience of Bandon was the bypass. We started to do some work here. Myself and my colleagues stood on the bridge. I think I have a photo, the narrow bridge just here, crossing over onto Maxwini Quay. And it was about 1 o'clock. Bells went off and thousands of students started to run across the bridge, and we nearly got thrown into the river. But it told us something very important, and it's something that we often don't think about, is the value we often speak about the value of education, but from a much more selfish perspective, the value of having lots of schools in your town. Bandon has 8 schools in the town. Is it 4 secondary level schools? That is a huge economic asset. There's a tendency and a trend in this country for amalgamations and building great large new schools on bypasses, and it has occurred in Young. What you do is you take about 1,000 students and their parents, who collect them sometimes, and drop them off, and you take them away from the town centre. You physically isolate them. You're losing lots of money. But it's not just about money, it's about social interaction. The town filled up with students, not necessarily buying something. That's 2 minutes, Liam. And here are all the schools. They're all within reasonable distance of the town centre. Perhaps think about how best to connect those schools into the town centre, and how to protect those uses, and to make sure that if there is a northern bypass or the bypass is finished, that you don't get a super amalgamated school. It would be a fantastic school with loads of car parking, but it would have a significant impact on your town centre. Jan Gehl, the Danish architect and urban planner, talked about the idea of making a go-to place and not a go-through place. Let's make Bandon a go-to place. How do we do that? It's not just in retail terms, making it a destination. Lots of people come to towns and they don't go shopping. Someone else with them goes shopping. They go and have lunch. But the experience of the town centre is extremely important. And it's all of the things that have been mentioned already. Civic spaces, quality food offering, but also a certain type of retail. And I get a sense, and this is purely anecdotal, it's not based on any evidence, that Bandon is beginning to carve something of a niche in retail terms as a place where people go to buy certain things for weddings, for events, but also there's an associated food and drink and cafe culture that goes with that. And I see interesting comparisons with places like Middleton, for example, that succeed very, very well on that. One way to make it a go-to and not a go-through place might be a lorry ban when all of the works are done, and this was proposed a number of years ago. And my final point is in relation to innovation over imitation. Don't imitate. Hopefully we'll hear about other places over the next couple of days. Don't copy. They're not models for Bandon. They're places that we can learn individual, small and big things about. Bandon has been around for a very, very long time as a successful and important market town. It should have the confidence and the ability to continue that legacy. Finally, this was a protest that was, I think, captured about 2,000 people on the streets of Bandon at night over the flooding. That suggests that people care about the town in huge numbers. Not many towns have, public protests at all. This town had a public protest about the future of its town. That suggests that the ingredients that are necessary for a very, very successful place are there. So, thank you very much.